will do is probably read about 50 applications a day. That's my job at that point, to get to know you guys. The thing that you have to keep in mind is that the majority of places you're applying to, we are not looking for reasons to deny you. That would be a horrible, soul-sucking job, right? Like, somebody said, Julie, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, I crush dreams. Like, no, that's not what I want to do. I'm looking for those reasons to admit you. So if you think about the application in general, a lot of your application is quantitative, right? It's your grades, it's your list of activities, it's the basic facts about you. The essay is your one chance to be qualitative, to say, you've seen what I can do in the classroom, but let me tell you who I really am. Let me help you get to know me. Because especially at a school like mine where we're medium-sized, okay, a little preview here. So we are a medium-sized school. That's a huge part of my process, is yes, I want you to be successful academically, but yes, I want you to feel like you fit at my institution. So if you're not really super familiar with us, a lot of times people are like, oh, that's the basketball school. Yeah, that's how you know us probably. You pick us in the tournament. You should. We have an amazing basketball team. But we're also medium-sized in the city of Cincinnati, so just about 5 hours away. Probably best known for our direct entry nursing program, great finance, great accounting, really amazing pre-med preparation. Last year, 85% of our students who applied to med school got in. So, you know, just some great things. I will not belabor the point, but I will tell you this. We were the first school in North America with a pizza ATM, right? So this guy, it's a big machine. It's like a room-sized machine. You can walk up to it 24/7, give it $9. 3 minutes later, out of this slot comes a 12-inch pizza in a box. Woo! So if that's not enough to get you to think about Xavier, I don't know what is. So we'll zip through. So why do we ask for the essay in the first place? We want to get to know you. Not just quantitatively, like I said, but we want to see that you can write. I don't care where you're going to school, you're going to have to write at some point. Even in math class, you might have to write. So we want to see that you have the chops. You don't have to be like Pulitzer Prize winning writer, but we want you to be able to put some sentences together and create a cohesive story. It's very much, and I'm sure your English teachers have said this since, you know, you were whatever elementary school you were at, you want to show us, you don't want to tell us. You want to give us those details that is going to help the story be yours. And sometimes that's a little scary. Sometimes that's, I'm so used to writing English papers where, you know, it's a good old 5-paragraph essay, right? Paragraph to tell you what I'm going to tell you, 3 paragraphs to tell you what I'm telling you, and a paragraph to tell you what I told you, right? If that works for you, awesome. The essay is, hi, good morning. This essay is really more of a reflection. So know that. I know sometimes the hardest part of this process is figuring out where to start. I get asked all the time, Julie, what should I write about? And I'm like, I have no idea because I don't know you yet. You shouldn't be worried about what does the admission committee want to read. We want to read about you. And I will also say, a lot of times students get nervous because they don't think their story is big enough, right? Like, oh, I don't have this horrible tragedy. I don't have this amazing skill that I can do. There's a magic trick that I've perfected, like, whatever. I don't know. You don't have to have a giant story. One of my favorite essays ever, there used to be a question on the Common App that was something like, I'm going to paraphrase, talk about a time or an event in your life that marked your transition from childhood to adulthood. That's a pretty weighty question, but the best answer I ever read to that question was about from a guy who, in middle school, asked a girl to the movies, and during the movie put his arm around her. Like, yeah, that's, you know, and then my favorite part of it is he's talking about getting ready and how nervous he was, and so to get himself less nervous, he put on his favorite cargo shorts and his best graphic tee and, like, sprayed the Axe body spray in the air and did one of these numbers, you know? So you get a feel for, here's this human who's quirky and lovable and all those kinds of things. So this is the question, or this is the thing, I guess, to consider if you're still stuck in that, what do I write about? Here's something you might not know about. know, like I see, when I read your application, I see your list of activities, right? You don't need to like spit out like I was, you know, all conference, or I, you know, played football for 12 years or whatever it is. Tell me about that moment when you realized this is my jam. Or tell me about that moment when you realized I don't want to do this anymore. You know? Those are, the story behind the story is what makes it interesting. Not just the recitation of here's all the things that I've done. Does that make sense? Good. Okay. So, what am I looking for? Like I told these guys, I read like 50 applications a day when I'm in reading season. The question I get often is, what if it's a terrible essay? Do you read it? Yes. That's my trust or my promise to you. If you've taken the time to apply, I'm going to take the time to give your application its due diligence. I'm going to read everything you send us. It's really nice when that essay's got something that pulls me in right from the get-go. I will tell you though, as a writing tip, maybe for lack of a better term, don't feel like you have to start with that amazing first sentence. Because it's probably not just going to pop out of your head. I'm on the faculty of a couple of different essay writing workshops, and so what happens a lot of times is students will write that first draft. Those first 2 or 3 paragraphs are just you like dumping your brain out onto a piece of paper, right? Like, oh, what am I going to write about? That hook or that amazing first sentence is oftentimes, or that idea for the hook is oftentimes buried in that first draft somewhere. But have something that grabs me. Again, this should not be a surprise to you if you have had an English class, and I know you have. You need an into, a through, and a beyond. You need something to draw me into the story, you need something to take me through, and then you need a way to tie it all together. I'm going to show you the questions on the Common App and show you how they guide you to this whole into, through, and beyond. Sometimes this is the part of the essay that you guys spend the most time on. You feel like you've got to tell me all the minutia of the story to give me enough background so I feel like, okay, I know what you're talking about. Jump in. Think about if you're in the caf and you're telling your friends what happened last night. You're not going to be like, okay, remember yesterday when we were in math class and we were sitting next to each other and you had a blue shirt on? Like, no. You want to get to the good stuff in the story, right? Jump in. The other thing too is remember you only have 650 words max to tell this story. Don't waste 300 of them on, it was a lovely sunny day when I decided to, no, like, get to the story. And then, oh my gosh, answer the question. Again, seems pretty normal, like you'd want to answer the question, but double check. Because I know you guys are going to work really hard on one great essay. You may submit it to several schools. Those schools may have very different questions. So make sure that your essay is answering those. I like to share pictures of my friends. You guys know Nicole McLaughlin, this is her mom. So I like to share pictures of my friends because I also want you to remember that the people who read these essays are humans. We do this job because we like to get to know you. We like to work with students. So again, you want to be able to express yourself to people who want to hear your story. You know, this isn't like, oh, I go to work every day, like, oh, I gotta read some more essays. No. I look at it, if you ever go to the library or the bookstore or wherever you buy reading materials, little library in somebody's front yard, right? On the book, on the back of the book, it's got like a little synopsis. On the book jacket, there's like a little bit more of a synopsis. Your application itself is kind of like that stuff. Your essay is when you finally crack the spine of that book and you start to read and you get engaged in the story. That's the way we look at booking. Okay, so let's talk about the kinds of essays you might encounter. If you are applying to a school that pretty much uses its own application, you might encounter a question like this. Please provide a 1 to 2 page essay on a topic that interests you. That's the worst question ever written. Right? Like, oh God, where do I even start? So they give you a little bit of guidance in their instructions, an experience or a person who has influenced you, your perspective on an issue, any circumstances you want us to consider. We'll talk about COVID here in a minute, but this is, hey, you know, something was going on in my life. That's the other thing. You know, as we're reading applications, we get it. Life happens to people. And if you tore your ACL and you were out of school for a couple of weeks, or you had mono, or your parents got divorced, and there was a lot of stuff going on in life that affected what you were doing in the classroom, this would be a good place to talk about that. Let us know, so we're not just guessing, like, oh, the bottom fell out second semester, sophomore year. I mean, I'm going through this, but, you know, where did this all come from? If you're applying to ISU, and you look at the academic profile for ISU, and you realize, hey, I am not in their middle 50%. I don't quite match what they're looking for. ISU asks you to write an academic personal statement. Very different from that first one that I showed you. The first one that I showed you is very much like, tell me a story about you. This is, tell me a story about you academically. So ISU wants you to take, do the math for us, connect the dots. Why are we a good fit for you and what you want to do? Talk about your strengths and weaknesses. I know sometimes it's easier to talk about the weaknesses as opposed to saying, I'm really super organized, or I love math, or whatever it might be. So, question or stretch?
If we talk about our weaknesses, will they make us take those classes?
Well, it depends on the school. Some schools may say, you know, hey, part of our graduation requirement is that you have a math class or you have a history class. But I will tell you this. We recognize that that's not everybody's strong suit. So, you know, you might take like a math concepts, but it's really rooted more in a liberal arts and sciences or like an English as opposed to actually doing like calculus. So there's that. Again, they give you that opportunity to talk about the circumstances, so this is a little bit different. If you're using the Common Application, and I'm guessing that a lot of you probably are because there's about 800 schools that are on the Common App. You don't have to write all 7. And somebody like panicked, visibly panicked. I'm like, no, you don't have to write 7. You just have to write 1. Here's what you need to know about this. All of these questions have one thing in common. While they're all really different, and if you looked at them, you're like, some of them resonate with me, some of them do not. The thing that all of them have in common is the word you. And that's powerful, because that's your way of saying, here's who I am, right? So I'm going to use number 2, because number 2 gets used a lot. The lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? That question is written with into, through, and beyond in mind, right? So the into is, tell me about the time you faced the challenge. The through is, how did it affect you? The beyond is, what did you learn? Again, lots of times it's much easier to talk about the into, right? Here's what happened. You want to know what I read about most with that question? It's sports injuries. It's torn ACLs, it's broken legs. It's also, I didn't get the part in the play, I didn't make it into the elite choir, I didn't, you know, whatever it is. We all have those moments. But again, the powerful part of this, and I think the place where you guys can really shine, is the how did it affect you and what did you learn? One of my favorites, if I can have a favorite, of the torn ACL stories, a lot of times it's, you know, this like overwrought description of the moment that ACL popped, right? So it's like, I was running on the soccer pitch and all of a sudden I felt that sickening pop in my knee and then I was writhing in pain and I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, it's not a great moment. But instead of telling me all the things that you learned, you're just talking about like rehab and stuff. My favorite one, girl, basketball, captain of her team, star player, tears her ACL, realizes I have a new role to play. I'm not the star, I'm not on the court, but I'm still part of the team and now I'm sitting on the bench. As a player, she wasn't a super vocal player. She never wanted to like shout encouragement or like, hey, you need to move 4 feet to the left to her teammates, because she didn't want to be seen as like the know-it-all, right? But sitting on the bench, she was like, now I can kind of take that role because I can see things that people don't see because I'm not in the moment. And her teammates came back to her and said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, this has been great. You know, we always loved playing with you, but now, like, you've taken on this new role as, like, cheerleader advisor. It was a really good, because she learned so much about her own leadership style from the fact that she tore her ACL, and it wasn't all about the injury. This is a new one this year, and I think that's really definitely a reflection of what we're doing in our lives right now. Reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? I'm excited to read those. I hope I get a bunch of those. I will tell you I've read about, I don't know, 30 applications already. It's a lot of 1 and 2, and that's okay. You pick the one that's right for you. There are a handful of schools out there that pride themselves on having really out there questions, right? University of Chicago is probably the most famous of these. This is my favorite of their out there questions. This one's from about 5 or 6 years ago. Find X. That was the whole question. What? Some of you might look at that and be like, okay, I got 14 ideas. Some of you are like, what are you talking about, find X, right? But that's University of Chicago. They're a little quirky, they're a little different. Here's another one of my favorites. Sarge said hell is other people, but Streisand saying people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. With whom do you agree and why? Don't be icky. That's Amherst in Boston. Now, first, you need to know who both those people are. Second, this question is telling you, hey, if you like people, this might be your place. If you don't like people, this might be your place. So, very interesting to me. This one I love too. You have just completed your 300-page autobiography. Please submit page 217. Now, I always looked at this question as, you want me to like project myself into the future. Page 217 would be someplace past middle age probably, like what have I accomplished in my life? What have I done? And then I had a student say, I'm 17, so page 217 is like when I was 15. I was like, duly noted. You can take it that way too. And then this is my newest favorite. What song should we be listening to while we read your application? Sometimes when I'm meeting with students, I ask them if they have a theme song or a walk-up song. You know, or what is that song you get in the car at the end of the day, and you just, it comes on the, you go through your playlist and you find it and you just blast it. What is that song? I will tell you when I ask students that, I usually, well, A, I find new bands that I like, but B, I will make a playlist for that reading. Like, these are all the students that I met, and here's the playlist that week reading. So, couple of schools will ask questions like this. Why our school? So, if you're applying to Marquette, they ask why Marquette. If you're applying to UW-Madison, they ask why UW-Madison. That is not the time to tell them all of the nice words that they've sent to you in their brochures and in their emails. This is, hey, we have to make a decision about you being part of our campus community. You do the math for us. You tell us why you think you're a good fit. So a lot of times students are like, well, I haven't been able to visit, so I don't know if I'm a good fit. What is it about that school that made you excited about it in the first place? What is it about that school that you've done the research to say, I can totally see myself in a classroom like that? I really want to join. We have a club at Xavier called 4 Paws for Ability. And basically what they do is they help to socialize service dogs. So we have Goldens and Golden Doodles on campus that students like bring to class so that they learn how to be service dogs, right? If we had a why Xavier and that was your thing, that would be an excellent way to answer that. I know that I'm going to get a great education, but I'm really excited about, taking Triscuit. They're all named after crackers this year. Taking Triscuit, through her piece. That'd be a great way to answer it. U of I will ask you, why do you want to major in whatever at the University of Illinois? Again, this isn't just, I want to be an engineer, and I know you have a great engineering program, so that's why I want to go to U of I. Lots of places have great engineering programs. What is it about the engineering program at U of I specifically that makes you say, I'm excited about this idea? You know, and again, you don't have to be like, well, in Physics 304, I know that in the 4th week of the semester, like it doesn't have to be that. But what is it about the opportunities or the environment or the connections? Those are the things that we want to see. Yeah, you did your homework, so it's a little bit of a test. You know us well enough. But it's also, how do you see yourself fitting into our community? Again, it goes back to this whole notion of fit, right? So, loaded questions. On the common application, there are 2 questions that are absolutely optional. You don't have to answer these unless you've got a compelling story to tell. One of them is the community disruption question. You can call it the COVID question if you want, but also recognize this is for students who live in areas that are affected by earthquakes, wildfires, civil unrest, you know, all of those kinds of things. So, if there is something about the last year and a half that has really affected you, answer this question. If there is not, you don't have to fill it out. So this isn't like, darn it, you know, I didn't get a prom. That's not what this is. This is, you know, we didn't have constant internet access at my home, or God forbid someone passed away and I had to take on a new role in my house. Those kinds of things. There's also it's called other information. So this is where, if you want to tell the admission committee anything about you specifically that we wouldn't already know. Maybe you want to talk about, you know, being diagnosed with a learning difference. Or maybe you want to talk about, oh, by the way, there really wasn't a place to put this, but, you know, I'm a champion beekeeper. I don't know. Like, those are the kinds of things that fit in that question. But otherwise, pretty much everything has a home in the application. So, those are the questions. So now, let's get ready to write. Let's think about where this is going and how we're going from there. There is a great website out there called collegeessayguy.com. So if you need some like brainstorming exercises, some ways to get your mind kind of like in the zone to write, he's got some amazing brainstorming exercises. Here's a few of the questions in some of those exercises. I love this one. What is your actual superpower? You're like, how does that work with a college essay? What are you talking about? But if you think about that, there's a lot of ways it can apply to those questions in the Common App. We're going to help you. We as colleges and universities are going to help you when you look at the question. Just reading the way the question is written will probably help you. So if we tell you to list, compare and contrast, you know, any of those kinds of things, we're giving you a roadmap to figure out how to write that. Why do we tell you you have between 250 and 650 words? Well, one, it's just a respect thing. Again, I read 50 applications a day. But it's also part of the exercise. How do you use that word limitation to your benefit? And this is why I caution you, don't write that entire, like, here's, you know, bell, book, and candle. Here's everything that you need to know about this one incident, when really the important stuff is going to come later. So figure out how to use those words. I talked about the 5-paragraph essay. For some of you, that works perfectly. For some of you, chronologically, it's going to work perfectly. I was actually working with a student yesterday on her essay, and I said, I think this would be more helpful if you told the end first and flashed back to the beginning. She was like, what? I'm like, here's how you solve the problem. Start there, tell me about the problem, and then come back to the solution. She was like, oh, okay. We played it a little bit, and it really did. It read much, much better. I had a young lady one time who wrote her essay about teaching herself how to play the piano. And so when she wrote her essay, the first sentences were really short and choppy, used small words. As the essay progressed, the sentences got longer and more flowery, used more adjectives, used more descriptions. And I didn't catch it the first read, but the second time I went through it, I was like, holy cow, she wrote this like you learn how to play the piano. You plunk, 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 until you start to figure out where the keys are and you're able to do some things, and then all of a sudden it turns into this beautiful piece of music. That worked for me. I will also say this is an essay where you can, and I encourage, the use of the word I. I know in English class they tell you all the time not to do that. This is absolutely a reflection. Use the word I. Again, I'm going to go back to my CAP example. If you were meeting somebody new, you wouldn't talk to them like you were writing an English paper. You would tell the story. Yes, this is still academic. Yes, you want to put your best foot forward. But in essence, you are introducing yourself to the admission committee through the use of a story. So think about it that way. If you're like, okay, Julia, that's all well and good, but I still, every time I sit down and look at my Chromebook, I'm like, I got nothing, and then you stare at the blank screen for like 15 minutes, and then you close it, and you're like, there's got to be something better on Netflix, right? So how do you even get started? Here's a little trick that I like to share with students. Take out your phone, turn off all your notifications, pull up your timer. Set your timer for 10 minutes. Hit go, and just start typing. Like, it could just be like finger exercises. It could be, this is so dumb, why do I have to write an essay? Just get your fingers typing and like spit out all the thoughts that are in the back of your head. Like, I might write about this, I might write about this. When the timer goes off after 10 minutes, take a look at what you've got. Somewhere in that gobbledygook, you probably have a word or a phrase or a sentence or two that does something for you. My friend Amy would call it a nugget of goodness, right? So take that nugget of goodness, set your timer for 10 minutes more, type about that for 10 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, you have the roughest of roughest drafts, but you have something. And then that is something you can take to your school counselor, to your English teacher, to your mom, to whomever's going to help you with this process, so that you can at least say, I got 4 ideas, I haven't done anything. You've got maybe a paragraph and a half, maybe 2, and somebody can say, oh, I like this. Here's how you can flesh it out. But no matter what you decide to write on, absolutely make it yours. If you could take your name off that piece of paper and put your friend's name on that piece of paper and it would read just fine, you haven't added enough detail that makes it yours. That's what makes that essay I was talking about at the beginning, that's what made that essay really sing. It was the quirky, like, observations of this kid that I'm like, I know who you are now. It wasn't just, I took a girl in the movies, I was nervous, but I put my arm around her anyway. Snoozer, right? That's what we want to know. You don't have to rely on your thesaurus or your right click. You know, like you think, oh, there's got to be a better word I can put in here than amazing. And you right click and you're like, oh, here's this one that's this long. If you talk that way and you write that way, absolutely use the SAT words. If you don't. Again, we're not asking you to write at like a graduate school level because you're not there yet, right? If you do, cool, show off, you know, throw it out there. But don't feel like you've got to have, you know, the huge flowery language if that's not you. I said this before, I'll say it again, you don't have to have the biggest story ever. If you do, if you've got something really cool to tell me, tell me. But if your story is about how on Sunday afternoons, you know, you make a big pot of chili as a family and you watch football games, that's your story. And that's okay. So let us know how we can do that. The last piece is, have an opinion about what you're writing. Let me see that whatever you're writing about is important to you. Sometimes what I tell students is, this is a good first start, but you're holding that story here. I want you to hold the story here. You know, so have a way that you connect to that story that is yours. Because if I get 3 or 4 sentences in, again, I'm going to read your whole essay, but if I don't get the sense that you care about what you're writing, it kind of doesn't pass the so what test. It makes me think, was there something better you could have written about? Because you clearly are kind of like wishy-washy, lukewarm on this. Another thing too, if you're using this essay for multiple schools, don't mention a school in your essay. Because there are plenty of times when I've been reading an essay, especially on Common App, because it's one essay that goes to all the schools you're applying to. Somebody is writing this great essay, and the last sentence is like, and that's why I want to be a Buckeye at Ohio State. I'm like, dude, I'm not even in that part of the state. Like, clearly, you didn't think this through, that all of us are getting that. So Here's a few things I don't want you to write about. Fill in the blank, whatever, changed my life. You know, Superman ice cream at the creamery changed my life. I don't care what it is. If you have to use the phrase changed my life, guess what? You're telling me you're not showing me. There's a great way to say, you know, here's my life before, here's my life after. Your essay shows me that it changed your life. So stay away from changed my life. If you've had the opportunity to travel and you want to tell me a story about that, don't make it a travel log. Don't give, again, I don't want to know all the minutiae of how many times your plane was delayed and what the airport smelled like and, you know, all of those kinds of things. Unless, bless you, unless it's germane to the story. I think you can absolutely write about an experience where you left the comfort of Batavia, Illinois, but what was it about that experience that resonated with you? This is where I sometimes tell students, write your essay with a spotlight, not with a floodlight. So, you know, let's say you went on a mission trip. Mission trips, pretty much the same, theoretically, right? But what makes that mission trip memorable to you maybe isn't the whole picture. It's, here's the person I met. Here's the thing that really pushed me out of my comfort zone. I learned how to install a toilet, whatever it might be. Here's the thing that surprised me. Here's the thing that made me sad or happy. You can focus in on that one thing and not have to tell the whole story, right? Again, I'm not picking on engineers, but I used to work at Bradley, and we had an engineering program, and I read a lot of essays about Legos. That's okay. That's where, like, your tinkering vibe started, was when somebody handed you a box of Legos. Awesome. But if that's what you think engineering is, oh, friends, Calc 3 is nothing like Legos, right? So here's what, and I will also say the other popular one is, I want to be a nurse because I want to help people. Awesome. I help people too, and I didn't have to take anatomy and physiology for 2 semesters, right? So have a mature worldview, and if you want to say, here was the impetus, here was my origin story of why I decided I want to be an engineer, take me to now. I want to know about you now. You know, maybe you're like, I'm saving up to get the Millennium Falcon set, but I've also got this whole schematic of how I'm going to re-engineer it so it actually shoots lasers. Okay, tell me that, you know? But if it's all about, like, I've got Duplo blocks, I don't know. The other thing, too, is sometimes you want to write about someone who is no longer with us. And instead of using your 650 words to tell me about that awful day when that person passed away, I would much rather know, what was it about that person that made such an impact on you? What was the legacy that you want to carry on? And I will also caution you, if you're writing your essay about someone else, kind of stick to a 30-70 format. 30% about that other person, 70% about you. Because oftentimes, you get like caught up in the moment, and you're like, I just want to tell you how awesome my grandfather was. And 650 words later, I'm like, darn it, I wish your grandpa were still alive because I totally admit him, right? That's not what I want it to be. I want it to be, here's why he was a great person, here's what I want to continue to push forward that I learned from him, okay? So just some last pieces of advice. Lord mighty, spell check is not a substitute for proofreading, because y'all know spell check will catch it, not catch a word that's right, but it's very, very wrong in context. My favorite example of this, one of my friends that works for U of I, got an essay from a young man who wanted to talk about how his hunting trips with his dad were really just integral to his growing up, and that's where they had their big, deep conversations and whatever. He's writing about this hunting trip, and he keeps mentioning how they're hunting peasants. Peasants! Pheasants has an H in it. That's what you hunt. Peasants are like, middle-aged English people. Like, oh my God, what? You're killing people with your dad? That's not cool, right? So make sure that you have somebody proofread. Surprise is good, shock is not. Always love the twist. Don't feel like you have to be so out there that now I'm worried about you, or In several cases, people are like, oh, if I throw an F-bomb in here, she'll remember me. Well, yeah, I will. It's not a good way to be remembered, right? So don't do that. I will also say this, if you're funny, be funny. If you're not funny, don't try it. Like, that's not gonna work. But I appreciate some good humor in there. My friend Marty says, you know, proofread with your eyes, but write with your heart. It is a little bit like when you were in grade school and you wrote the "Do you like me?" You know, check yes, check no. It's a little bit like that, because you are putting this stuff on a piece of paper and hoping that somebody's gonna like you. And that's kind of a leap of faith, but no, I'm gonna like you. I just want to get to know you first. So that's the helpful there. And if I can leave you with anything as you head into your day this Thursday, you don't know this yet, but all of the schools to which you are applying have somebody that does my job. So you have an admission counselor, whether it's a gigantic school, whether it's a small school. You have somebody that's going to actually read that application. We read that application, we read your essay, we get to know you, quirks and all, and we get excited because we think, oh my gosh, you picked me to apply to my school. What if you actually come here? And I know sometimes you sit there and you think, oh my gosh, there's this one grade in my transcript, or my best friend has a better GPA, or what. You're you, and what makes you you makes our colleges and universities much more interesting. So you have all the power in this equation. Yes, I know it's application time, and you're like, I'm gonna hit submit and wait for 2 weeks to see if somebody likes me enough to say yes, right? But once you get those acceptance letters, you have until May 1st to make that decision. You have all the power there, because then it's me sitting in my office like, oh my gosh, I hope so much that this person picks my school. And then when you do, we'll do a happy dance. Like, we get excited, we tell our friends, we're like, oh my gosh, so-and-so is coming to my school. Did you know that? Did you know that's how this process works? It's not just like feeding the applications through the Bozo computer. There's a lot of humanity in this process. So if that's what's been holding you up about writing your essay, like, oh, nobody's gonna see this. People will see this. People will see it, people will know it, people will get to know you, and then in August when you move in, it'll be hugs all around because you're part of that campus community. So, yes, my question.
Is there a spot where this presentation will be?
Yes.
Yeah, so we can share that with the students here today, and then we're gonna take the recording and we'll put that on our website under the counseling and advising.
And here's me. So if you guys have a rough draft that you want to send me and say, hey, what do you think of this? By all means, shoot me an email. If it's on a Google Doc, you know, you want to give me editing access so I can type into it, fab. Like I said before, I just live here in Batavia, so if you want to go sit at Limestone and talk about essays, we can do that too. And then, actually, I have a new phone number, so I will give you that too if you want. You can text me questions. It's 630-299-9669, and I'll change it so that it's in your presentation. Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns, anecdotes, knock-knock jokes? Anything you want to share? All right. Happy writing. Good luck.